our next topic where we give a spotlight to these entrepreneurs and creatives who made their passion into business. From handmade goods to a whole new enterprise in fashion and so on. So, of course, we want to give a spotlight to these creative entrepreneurs who made all this possible. Now, before we proceed to that, the segment is powered by PLDT, Maya, Wilcon Depot, Yazaki Torres MFTG Inc., San Miguel Corp, and Gcash. Now, we won't keep you waiting any longer. Let's call our panelists on the stage. World-renowned from furniture and design industry, he is a design entrepreneur, Kenneth Cobonbue. From events management industry, he is a fashion show producer, event director, and I have to add this, of course, legendary. You've seen it through all of the events, Robbie Carmona.
Yo.
From industry of design and fashion, she is the founder and creative director of Philip plus Ina, Len Kabili. Those introductions, of course, were very, wow, I had to make sure I got those right, because for those of you in the audience who have not had the good fortune of meeting these individuals here on stage, it's truly remarkable, all of your stories. So we have to, of course, start at the very beginning, because a lot of these entrepreneurs are starting from somewhere. So can you take us back to the beginning, where you turned your passion into your business? I want to start with you, Kenneth.
Yeah, so I come from Cebu. I still live in Cebu. And, the furniture industry back then, well, it still is today. We were making furniture for different brands abroad. And so all our furniture would be labeled under different brands, but never a Filipino one. It was unheard of. There were no Filipino brands whatsoever when I started. So it was a decision on my part to start to put my name on every piece and to insist that it was made in the Philippines. It was very difficult to be taken seriously before because I didn't have a name, and to people, the Philippines was not a name you associated with luxury. So it was a struggle. And so I persisted, and later on, because of the design and not the name, I got, Hollywood celebrities, and it was in a lot of music videos, and so soon stores wanted to carry the name, But it was a struggle. It's a struggle up to today to make the Philippines synonymous with luxury.
I have to ask before we move down the line, do you remember whether it was one or two particular moments where you realized that there was recognition to the Filipino identity and your name along the lines of what you do?
Yeah, so I think I became known in the Philippines because of Brad Pitt. When Brad Pitt bought the bed, right? And before
I have to say that was a legendary moment.
yeah,
I have to say.
Sometimes it takes Hollywood to make to get you known in your own country, right? And so. So he started. He bought. Brad Pitt is really an aficionado designer. If you go to his home, he would know who designed every piece, right? But back then, I really didn't have a name, so it was only because of the strength of the design that he kept on buying, and then we were on several movies like Ocean's 13, and then kept on and on, and so. Then that's how the name became synonymous with then Hollywood and all that, so.
That's such a great story. I knew you were going there because it was the first story that came into my mind when I first heard about you before. So honestly, it's still such a great, heartfelt moment to hear. Speaking of something that's heartfelt for me, I have to move down the line to Robbie. Now, Robbie, I'll let you do your introductions, but I have to say this. Robbie was my very first director. He was my very first director as a host. He was my very first director in the fashion industry. But he's also a testament as to you putting yourself through experience and then elevating that. Because he first started as a talent and model. But I'll let you tell the rest of the story. Because Robbie taught me how to walk before. I'll let you, Robbie.
Okay, I started as a model, but I had that passion already to direct fashion shows. Kasi nung nagmo-model ako, so I would work with other directors. Tapos every time I see their backdrop or the music that they play, isipin ko, paano kung ako yung director noon? Anong music yung ipi-play ko? Or what kind of backdrop yung gagawin ko dito? So I had that passion na. I had that hunger to direct fashion shows. Moving forward, when I turned 22, sabi ko, I wanna do it already. So I started my company. Sasabihin ko sana how many years ago pero hindi na lang malalaman yung age ko. Pero okay lang. So I started my company 30 years ago and I didn't even finish college. So hindi ako nakatapos ng college. First year college lang, irregular pa. So I started Saga Events in my own small apartment in Shaw Boulevard. May 3 CD, isang CD player, isang typewriter, manual pa yon hindi pa electrical yon. And telephone with fax machine. Kasi wala pang laptop, wala pang computer, at wala pang cellphone. At wala pang email that time. So, and I was building with my cousin who was working with me as my assistant. So, looking back, ang dami kong napagdaanan as a business owner kasi hindi ko nga alam. Kanina sabi rin ng mga ibang speakers, they don't even know how yung accounting or hindi mo man lang alam yung brand, how you start even with the logo, yung mission, vision, hindi ko alam yon. Ang gusto ko lang mag-direct ng fashion show. Yun ang gusto ko lang gawin from that very onset. But with God's guidance, after 30 years, Saga Events from being a fashion show production company, now it's a 360-degree marketing company. So I'm very proud sa nangyari. And it's not just because of me. It's because of the people that I work with that are so passionate. They're not just my colleagues or they're not just my employees, but now I consider them part of my family. Yan nga. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to let you say because it's really. Please give him a round of applause. It is such a heartfelt story. I had to bring it up because a lot of the people that you work with to this day were there at the beginning of my career, and I'm gonna give my age away. I started in 2010 with the modeling industry when I was still in college, which means you really have this family that's still with you until this point. But before all of this, did you have that? Was there this one moment, 1 year, or one job? Where throughout all the hardships, you realized, I'm doing it. Can you share with those who are starting out?
Yes, because the company nag-grow na siya, no? From just being a production company, a fashion show production, we're getting corporate accounts. So, and that's where you see that you have to professionalize your business. Kasi meron tayo mga sa bahay lang, we started with really small, but then pag lumalaki na siya, you have to put a lot of systems in place na. Kailangan mo na ng consultation about your system. May mga logistics, production, etc., etc. And doon mo na nararamdaman na, wow, hindi na to passion lang na gusto ko lang mag-direct. This is a business. And not only for myself, kasi iisipin ko yung mga empleyado ko. At saka yung mga family nila that are also, of course, benefiting from the business. So kasama yon sa passion, kasama yon sa dedication na iisipin mo rin yung pagmamahal mo sa mga tao mo. So I think that was my realization na, wow, lumalaki na yung business.
That responsibility for the people around you as well, but also the passion that you have for your own business, which carries on. Speaking of passion for your business, I have to go to you, Len, because the industry that you also work in particular, it's a very trying industry at times. But it also makes the story so much sweeter once you start getting recognized for being that Filipina behind it. Can you please share with everybody how you got started?
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Len Kabili. My journey started, I was taga Mindanao ako. Is there anyone here na taga Mindanao? Wala? Oh, okay. Hello, maayong hapon. So I was born in Mindanao, and my childhood, I was actually exposed to all these different indigenous groups. And then I went to college, I took up fashion, but upon graduating, parang I was hesitant to get into fashion because the commercial side of it, it was a bit too much for me. Fashion can be very intense, right? In terms, it's like the competition, the cutthroat lifestyle, or even like just the work can be, can take so much out of you. And so, but it took a trial in my life. I was diagnosed with cancer. It was actually thyroid cancer. And when you're dealt with the cancer card, parang you start thinking of your life na, teka, parang death becomes more real in your life. And so I started thinking what I was meant to be doing. And prayer really helped, because as I would pray, it would always, the word fashion that would come up. And it made sense because, I took it up in college. I was just really fearful of getting into it. So when I practically surrendered to God and I remember telling him na, okay God, I'll do fashion, pero kailangan yata medyo something different. I can't do the commercial fashion. And the answer came, I had a trip to New York. I met a textile designer, and as I was in his library flipping through his books, I noticed he would encircle mga villages. It was a book on craft in Asia, and he would write, a particular skill that they had in this village. And having grown up in Mindanao, my mom is from Basilan, and then I danced for Bayanihan. I had that love for culture and that awareness of what we had in our culture. So I remember sitting there and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go back to the Philippines and I'm going to do the same thing, but within the context of the Philippines. And when I got home, I started working with the artisans. I thought of a brand name. And I thought of something that needed to point back to the Philippines. I didn't go eponymous. So eponymous, like Kenneth, is it's after his name. I really felt like it had to be something that would point back to the Philippines. Pinaka-obvious, ako ay isang Pilipina. And we ended up with Filipina. There's a plus sign in the middle. It really signifies that it's been a faith journey for me. I think sitting here in front of you, I cannot credit myself, but it's really, I know God has opened opportunities like this for me to speak about my journey, which really, He is like a big part of the journey. And the plus sign also is signifying that there's tradition and contemporary working together. It's us with the artisans working together. And I think it's reflective in life. Now, we can't claim success on our own, that it really takes a village, as Kenneth and Robbie had mentioned. It's really like a collective thing. Whether it's Kenneth in the factory with the laborers and the artisans working on the piece, Kenneth with his team. I think in life, once you have that lesson, we need other people to create something different. And I think that's where Filipina started. And we're going on our 17th year.
So can you say that again? 17th year?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's honestly incredible. I think that's exactly why all three of you are on stage, because you are proof that through your own personal faith in something more, whether it's also faith in our culture, you're able to push forward in your own vision. Now, I do want to bring it back to identity, of course, because as being Filipinos here on stage, you all represent something more. not just the execution of your idea, but you also represent the culture. How important, and I want to go back to Kenneth over here, because you mentioned the hardships that it takes to move forward, and that's a very difficult industry. Why and how important do you think it is to include Filipino identity in what you do? Because it's easy to make furniture that has basically just a universal identity or a generic identity. But how and why is it important to include something Filipino in it?
So actually, kasi I sell in the global market, no? No one really cares if you're from the Philippines or this is, no one really, it doesn't really matter. I think what's important is what does your design have that the others don't have? And so I look at our culture and I use the things that are around us, the craftsmanship, the hand weaving, the materials. And so that's our strength. But it's also hard because when you sell abroad, diba, syempre you have to pay for shipping, logistics, and everything. No? So the cost is the same. But there's a prejudice kasi attached to a certain country. Kunwari, let's say, etong upuan na to, the 3 chairs, if it's kung parehong presyo, let's say 1,000 pesos, yun made in Italy, ito made in China, made in the Philippines, alin ang bibilin mo? Diba? You would immediately say, the Italian one, diba? And that's hard but why? Because there's always the mentality na Italian made, European made is better than Philippine made. And so that's my struggle every time. Kasi in the end, when we sell abroad, we compete against other countries that have meron silang history, they have branding, they have everything. And I only have the strength of the design, right? But I'm proud. I always wave the Filipino flag in all the shows abroad, from Milan to New York, Paris. I'm the only one in the Filipino waving the Filipino flag, And so it's a struggle, but I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of the Made in the Philippines brand.
Round of applause, please. I think that's why when I talk to 3 of you here, that's why that saying exists, that nothing great and good is easy. If not, everybody would do it. Everybody would be standing on a stage, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. So, and which also brings me to Len again. Did you have similar struggles when you were trying to bring Filipino expression into your work?
Yeah, a lot. When I started in 2008, 2009, the in thing was to wear foreign brands. And so when I remember I started working with 5 Tiboli artisans, and then when I got the first package, I got goosebumps. But then my first thought was like, oh no, where do I sell this? Kasi there was that time, no Instagram, no platform. And so the way I saw it was, when you make it abroad, that's when you get accepted here. So there was a very strong colonial mentality. And I think in a way it has improved at present time. But back then, talagang it was like whether it's Benetton or other foreign brands. So I thought, okay, maybe I should try selling abroad first. And luckily for me, 6 months after I started, and this is a whole faith journey because the whole time I was always praying for the next step. I was supposed to have Bible study that time, and this was after trying to sell it in New York. I came back and I was just browsing through the internet. I stumbled upon a website. It's a high-end travel company. I sent them a cold email within 3 minutes. She emailed me back. And then within 10 minutes, I got invited to my first trunk show in the Southampton. And when I asked her, how many pieces should I send? And she said, 30 to 35. I went back to my sample rack and I had 35. And so I sent it to them. We sold around 27 pieces. And my first 5 years, 5 to 7 years, my primary market was actually in the US. And I had a guilt because people abroad were appreciating it, and I felt like I was called to bring it back home. And so I did a collaboration with Bio, and that was officially the start of like penetrating the local market. But it is hard to, you know, claim that you're made in the Philippines. I had a similar experience as Kenneth. I was doing a show in Paris, and parang it's a trade show, so people go and buy for their store. And when I was there, they were looking at the insides of the garment, and it's hand sewn. And they were like surprised because RTW doesn't do hand sewing. And they were, you know, I was explaining this is hand embroidered by artisans, and they were saying, "Oh, beautiful." And then when they asked me how much the wholesale price was, and I gave them the wholesale price, they told me, "Oh, it's too expensive for something coming out of the Philippines." So they look at us as a supplier, not as a country exporting brand. And that's why I'm so proud of Kenneth, because he's really one of the first that has exported brand out into a global stage. And I think as we all start our own businesses, it's so important to put the mark of our identity, our being Filipino, because creativity is very personal. So it really should start with who we are as a Filipino. And I think that's already an advantage over someone who's doing the same thing like in a global stage.
No, but you're also talking about something very important, which is building trust, which is something that Robbie deals with a whole lot, because you have to build trust that with the client. You have to build trust because being a Filipino director, I'm sure, especially when you were starting out, how do you convince an international brand to be like, hey, like I'm the director for you. This is a creative vision that a Filipino can execute for you. I'm sure you had similar struggles because there is that pressure being a Filipino executing an international brand show. How did you go about these initial struggles?
Well, before I answer that, I just want to add what Len and Ken have said earlier. No? I just want to add, as a Filipino creative, our Filipino identity is we are world-class creatives. Always remember that, no? And I'm so honored to be sitting beside two world-class Filipino creatives with me. And moving forward, that's exactly what happened to me also dealing with international clients and collaborators. I have the honor kasi to work with international production companies here in the Philippines because they do concerts here that's internationally organized, and they need Filipino production company to work with that can do their logistics, that can help them with manpower or even execution. And I've had a couple of experience working with them before or even at the present. And then every time I work with them, they will always be amazed how we work, tayong mga Pilipino. We're very hardworking, we're very passionate. Tapos tayo yung we never say no. Diba? Parang kaya ba? Kaya! Lagi na lang tayong ganon. And they're so amazed kasi sila, there are times that they'll say, no, that's not part of my scope. Eh tayo, kahit sometimes hindi nakasama sa atin, we are just so passionate that we just want to help also, and we want to make things work. So, ganon, no? And they see that passion in us. So after the show, sabi nila, wow, you Filipinos are amazing, huh? You work so hard, huh? Thank you. I just say thank you. Okay, your standards are world-class. So that you have to remember, all of you, lahat tayo, pwede tayong maging global creatives because that's part of our Filipino identity and it's part of our DNA. So yon. So yun yung mga challenges ko. But yun nga, every time I talk to them after a show, galing daw nating mga Pilipino.
But I think it's also something that we have to acknowledge and not just hear. Because sometimes we'll take sometimes we get shy in taking compliments. Eh. Like we should actually take it to heart as well at certain points. And we're very hardworking, but Filipino, paminsan mahiyain rin tayong tao. Eh. Like we don't put ourselves out there to be as acknowledged. And I think one of the reasons behind that, after speaking to other people, is there's a certain pressure that comes with being acknowledged. With the word more can be heavy for those who aren't accustomed to having it, aren't accustomed to pressure. You see a lot of international people who have struggles dealing with that level of being known. Are there some pressures that you have, Kenneth, and how do you overcome it once you start, being put up on that pedestal for being a Filipino designer that you are?
I think the biggest pressure for me is to constantly create something new, in the world of design. I'm sure si Len and Robbie has the same struggles as a creative. Yun ang basic na pressure is to always, you have to, because you've set the standards, so you always have to, produce something that's creative, and to, especially if you're kind of waving the Filipino flag, you have to be as good as the Italians or the other American, European, because you're already at that level. So that's always a struggle. And then you have to also prove, really, you have to I think you have to work extra hard, as Robbie was saying, even more than them, because we don't have a tradition. I remember one time I was exhibiting this chair in Paris, and somebody came to me and asked, how much is this? So when I gave the price, he said, how come it's so expensive? It's only from the Philippines. So there's always that notion na parang it's third world product. It should be third world price. So I always have to struggle, against that. To prove. So I have to prove to them that this is even better than the other chairs made in, European countries. And that's not easy.
That's also it's hard to, I guess, overcome that when we're looked at as a service industry so much, as service people so much. Because when we're looked at that way, automatically there's like a tiering system that comes with it. And as we try to move up in the world, it doesn't mean because you're third world, you can't be first class. There are still first class products that come from third world countries. The only reason why some people, I love all these international brands, but you see a lot of these brands, they're made in other Asian countries. But just because there's a foreign logo that's put on it, it becomes international. So it doesn't change. It just means that we have to acknowledge where it's from. But speaking of, the creative process and where it's from, I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that come with such a fast-moving industry like fashion, events, marketing. Robbie, how do you still keep up with all of this? And how do you still try to make it distinctly Filipino when you're doing all these other things?
Okay, so I experience creative block. Yes, because sometimes you're so overwhelmed with work, no? Ang daming mga factors that you have to consider in putting up a show, which supposed to be my focus is only directing, running the show. But then, as a business owner, you have to take care also sometimes of the logistics. Make sure that the logistics is being done properly, the setup, and also you have to do client servicing as well. So, ang dami kong hats na sinusuot. So sometimes it's very overwhelming. So what I do? I pause. I do a quick getaway. Maybe go to the beach, or sometimes as simple as manonood ka ng movie, to relax. Or I go travel 2-3 days just to refresh my mind, go to museums, watch people. Pagbalik ko, I'm refreshed again. So that's very important that we know when to pause so that we can come back even stronger. So that's one, no? And by the way, I have one, hindi naman secret, but I have one thing that I would like to share to you. My creative mind works better when I'm in a moving vehicle. So kahit nakasakay ako sa kotse, or I'm on a flight, or I'm in a bus, or even tricycle, papunta sa Boracay, papunta sa hotel, yon, umaandar yung creativity ko. And that's where some of the milestone ideas in my career came from. Sa tricycle sa Boracay, sa bus papunta ng Ayala, or sa kotse, or mga short flights ko. So, that's one secret. So kayo din, you discover where you can generate ideas. So, kung hindi nyo pa na-discover, it's about time to find that, no? And also, as a show producer and director, it is, or tayong mga Filipino creatives, it's very important na we create that brand, as you mentioned, or that signature. So ako, as they say, there's the Robbie Carmona show signature na the minute the audience enter the venue, the sounds that they hear, the lights, and then as soon as I start the show, the minute I dim the lights, and slowly the lights crawling to the stage, revealing the first model, and then that resounding applause from the audience, and then the show progresses to its grand finale, and then, of course, the after party. So yun, I was able to create that sensorial experience that is uniquely my brand. So, I encourage you also sa inyong mga negosyo that it's important na they see your signature. Kasi yun yung matatandaan nila.
And for some of them that do want to see that signature, please check out the hashtag Robbie's Runway. I believe it's correct, Robbie's Runway. You'll see a lot of the designs. No, we see it all the time with all the events he produces, of course. And honestly, it brings it all home, not just for me, but a lot of people. But speaking of home, I want to go to Len over here. You do something that is really not easy. You work with Filipino textiles. How do you manage that? Because I'm sure there might be other easier ways to source. There might be other easier ways to execute your own vision. Why and how do you do it?
You know, I think it's in the being rather than in the doing. I grew up in Mindanao, as I mentioned. I love Philippine culture. I wore my first terno when I was in like grade school. I had my first barotaya when I was grade 2, and it was made out of extra fabric from our upholstery fabric. And so I think it was instilled already, so it was really the being. When there's something difficult that faces you, you find a way around it, because it's not something that you have to do, but it's innate na you need to make it work. And working with artisans is very difficult. It's not like they're all housed in one factory and they work 8 to 5. Imagine having to coordinate with like at least 300 artisans, and they have direct communication with us. So we get, you know, whenever they need something, they can text. So I think it's not even like a passion, but it's just something in you that you're that. So you're singular in trying to make it work, because you just know that within the context of the brand, it's called Filipina. So kailangan talaga within the context of Filipino artisans or the craft, whether it's embroidery, beadwork, or textiles. And I think in terms of the textiles, yes, it's narrow, it crumples easily, it's hard to source, but I think that's part of what makes it interesting, that it's not like monotonous, na it's easily accessible. So even the width, I don't see it as a negative. Your creativity actually kicks in, because you only have like a 22-inch. What can I do out of like a 22-inch with fabric? So I think, again, I go back to the being versus the doing, because in the being, it naturally comes out. Parang you're always like wanting to make it work, while if you focus on the doing, ay mahal, ay pagod ako ngayon, ay saka na. So I think we should nurture the being Filipino, because out of that, it naturally comes into our work, the way we deal with the people that we work with, and yeah, it becomes like a mark in your brand without you being very intentional about it, because it just comes out of you.
You know, if I may, hearing three of you speak, one of the things I keep hearing is the beauty is in the process. You know, and you can't get to the ending without the story. It's you know, whether how difficult it can be, it only makes it more beautiful because you know how you got there and you know what you're trying to express. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left. So before we close, of course, I'd like to ask you, three of you, one question each. I want to start off with Len this time. We just touched on, you know, difficulties and adversity. What piece of advice would you give to creatives, to entrepreneurs when they feel discouraged?
As I mentioned, my faith plays a big role in my work and in my life. God is my go-to, whether it's deciding on selling to this place, or it's like everything. It's lifted up in prayer unto God, and He's the ultimate creative, right? And so. He would willingly give and assist you. And I think that's one. And number two is start small. I started with 5 artisans, and it's easy to pay 5 people. And when, after a few months, it just ballooned to like 25 without me realizing. They started pulling in people. And so start small, because when you start small, you get to enjoy the whole journey. And the third is, don't get too wrapped up with what other people say, or whether something has been written about you in the papers. Really know that why you're doing it. Never forget to always remember the reason why you started that business, and just focus on what's on your plate. And lastly, know what is enough. I think that's a big question that you need to answer as you're building your business. Know kung kailan ka kailangan maghindi, kung kailan ka pwedeng mag-oo. I think it's very important.
That's great. It's actually the first time we're hearing that today. Know when it is enough. I'll move on to Kenneth over here, of course. Vision is something that I believe we've been touching on for all three of you here on stage. What piece of advice can you give to those entrepreneurs, artists, creatives, could be content creators, to stick to your vision when everybody's telling you to do something else?
So I think there are 4 things that I always say to creatives, no, when you're doing something. No. The first is to love what you're doing, right? And so that's easy naman, because you would not be a creative if you didn't love what you're doing. Second is you have to be good at what you're doing. It's not that I love singing, but if I can't sing, then you can't sing. Diba? Third, no? The third is you have to make sure that there's a need for whatever it is that you offer. You know? If I'm going to make a chair, I always say the world doesn't need another chair. If I have to make a chair, I have to make sure that there's a need for that particular chair. And the fourth is that they have to be willing to pay the price for whatever it is that you do. So there is the value, you know, you have your value, you have to make it really worthwhile. Now, what makes this different? That I will pay this price for this particular design. You know? Yeah. So those are 4 things for me.
Ooh, well, like, three of you are living proof. So they just basically have to ask you questions, and maybe hopefully you recorded this conversation. I want to end with Robbie, because I know you personally, and you've become multifaceted throughout all your endeavors. So as we wrap up, how can you encourage young entrepreneurs, young visionaries to make their passion into profit, regardless of what they want to do?
Well, I have a quote here that I was actually browsing my social media earlier this morning, and then I came across this quote from Entrepreneurship Facts, their Instagram account. It says here, The future belongs to the consistent, not the talented, not the lucky, but the one who shows up even when it is hard. Show up, effort never betrays you. So, consistency is the key. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And with that, please give our panelists a big round of applause. Please do stand, of course. Then Robbie, Kenneth, please take center stage. We're going to have our photo up with all three of you. Can we compress a little bit? Can we take a couple of steps forward? I love it. Organized with design too. So sorry, can we have you take a couple of steps forward, please? There we go. I'd like to encourage all of you to look at that quote, "Here's to the crazy ones." And it ends with them looking like geniuses. One more big round of applause, of course. Robbie, Kenneth, Len, thank you so much